inclusion in Olivine provide constraints on the water contents of Archaean Komatiites.
Thank you. So my name is Evgeny Asafov. I'm a PhD student in Moscow, University Institute, and I'm going to talk about melt inclusions in Olivine from Archaean Komatiites. So Archaean Komatiites, all Komatiites are the ultramafic volcanic rocks that contain more than 18% MgO, and they result from high degrees of mantle melting. And they were first recognized not so far ago, only in 1969. So there had been a long debate, and it's still a debate about the water contents in the komatiite melts and about the mode of their origin. And here you can see the most provocative titles of the papers in the past about the water contents and their formation, like subduction-related genesis, plume-related genesis, again subduction-related genesis, and here is our recent work in Nature paper. So we studied melt inclusions in olivines from Abitibi Komatiites and revealed the plume origin for the Komatiites. And here I show the water estimates in komatiitic melts, so from 70s to present day. So in 70s it was mostly textural observations, and people claimed like up to 10% water. Also you can see low water contents. In the 80s and 90s there was a series of experimental works, and in experimental komatiites also different researchers obtained dry komatiite melts and water-rich conditions for komatiite melt formations. And here are our recent data. So again, the 2016 paper and 2018 paper based on studies of melt inclusions in Olivine that demonstrate that komatiite melts contain only up to 0.68% of water. And these are the only direct estimates of water in the komatiitic melts. So this here I showed spinifex textures. It's a characteristic feature for komatiites. So komatiite melts, komatiite flows have these dendritic skeletal olivine crystals that form these magnificent textures. And also from these pictures you can see that mostly komatiites are very significantly altered. You cannot find fresh volcanic glass in them, so it's not easy to estimate water in the komatiitic melt. But first, before talking about the compositions of melt inclusions in Olivine, we have to answer the question, is Olivine a good microcontainer for melt inclusions? And our answer is yes, because we see that in spite of the fact that komatiites were significantly metamorphosed and altered, we can still find remnants of fresh olivine and the octahedral olivine shapes. And also we did some mapping of olivine grains, and we can still find some initial magmatic zoning in the olivine. So we can see zoning in phosphorus, in chromium, in alumina, and that means that olivine grains escaped and were not altered, and they are capable of preserving initial magmatic melt inclusions. So natural olivine grains contain partially crystallized melt inclusions, like on this picture. So we had to rehomogenize them, and for this purpose we used the vertical furnace in the University Institute in Moscow. So here are shown the experimental conditions, and all these experiments are run with the controlled oxygen fugacity. And so after we rehomogenize, we do the rapid quenching, and then we got these glassy melt inclusions. And sometimes we have completely homogeneous melt inclusions that don't even contain the shrinkage bubble. And in these melt inclusions we do EPMA analysis, SIMS analysis, and then laser ablation SPMS analysis. So here are shown the small points are the individual melt inclusions. The big circles are the primary melts calculated from melt inclusions, and the dashed lines represent olivine fractionation line. It's the line, so this line represents the change of composition with fractional crystallization of olivine. And in komatiites, olivine is the only liquidous phase for a very long time. For this range of compositions, olivine would be the only phase to crystallize. And so we can see that major elements nicely follow olivine control lines. And you also can see that, so these red, green, and yellow dots are for the barbiton komatiites, and this gray are for bilingual komatiites, it's Zimbabwe, and this blue are for Abitibi komatiites, it's Canada. So you can see that they have different geochemistry, like barbiton komatiites are more silica rich, and also you can see that it's very low in titanium. But if we use the current geochemical classification, we would call bilingual komatiites and Abitibi komatiites alumina undepleted because of their 100-like alumina to titanium ratio, and we would call Voltaren komatiites alumina enriched because of their very high alumina to titanium ratio. But you can see that Voltaren komatiites do not have high concentrations of alumina, and they have very low titanium contents. And this means that we have some problems with current komatiite classification. So here are shown volatile contents in the komatiites, in melt inclusions from these samples. It's okay. Yes, I see. So again, these are for Voltaren melt inclusions. These are bilingual, and these are Abitibi komatiites. So you can see that chlorine contents in Voltaren komatiites are inconsistent with olivine control lines, and this and the same with water contents. So most evolved melts represent very high water and chlorine contents, which are inconsistent with fractional crystallization of olivine. And we suggest that this comes from the assimilation of crustal material, water-rich crustal material. It could be altered oceanic crust of the same composition like previously erupted komatiite, because we don't see any shift in major elements, but we only see a shift in volatile contents. In case of Abitibi melt inclusions, we see that there is no any correlation. It's just a cloud of, just a scatter of data points, and we suggest that maximum values here are most representative of the initial melt contents, and we only see the degassing effect in the melt inclusions. And here, the lowest contents in the Voltaren komatiite melts, the lowest contents are representative of the initial magma compositions. So we modeled some sort of contamination, mixing lines, and we used the compositions of our primary melts, and here you can see mixing lines of the primary melts with seawater derived brines of different salinity, and you can see that Abitibi komatiites are not consistent with any mixing line, whereas bilingual and Voltaren komatiites follow mixing line with just high salinity brines. So possibly the observed range in chlorine and the water contents could be driven by the assimilation of hydrous crustal material during the eruption. We also reconstructed crystallization conditions. So here I show the results for Voltaren komatiites. I have the same figures for bilingual and Abitibi, I just don't show it here. So from CO2 and H2O contents of the melt inclusions, we inferred very shallow depth crystallization of komatiitic melts. It's up to 1.5 kilometers deep, and very high crystallization temperatures. So crystallization temperatures were inferred independently by different methods. First is MgO, magnesium iron thermometer, which is based on measured water contents. It's shown here, the black dots. Also the independent method of scandium yttrium geothermometry, which uses distribution of scandium and yttrium between olivine and melt. So this data points here. And olivine spinel geothermometer, which is based on partitioning of alumina between olivine and spinel. So this is applicable for late stage melts because of spinel appears only after about 20% of crystallization. So we can see that about 60% or 50% of data points is consistent with the of scandium yttrium temperature estimates is consistent with the iron magnesium geothermometer. So it means that we see independently presence of significant amounts of water in the melts. And also this scandium yttrium geothermometer shows very high initial melt crystallization temperatures, so up to 1570 degrees Celsius. So we have very high chloride contents, we have very high water contents in our komatiite melts. Now the question, where are these high concentrations of volatiles derived from? So there are basically two theories. One is about subduction origin of komatiites, second one is about plume related origin of komatiites. So here we plot these spider diagrams showing that in our primary komatiite magmas we see any signature for subduction related origin. So no positive anomalies on rubidium, strontium, lead, also no negative anomaly on niobium, but we have very strong enrichment in chlorine and water. So, also having the compositions of our initial magma, we could reconstruct the mental potential temperature of the source and the depths of parental magma formation. So using these models, and we inferred that our primary komatiite melts formed at very high mental potential temperatures, so it's up to 1850 degrees C, and it's here you can see that it's higher than the temperatures of contemporary ambient mantle. It's at least 100 degrees higher than the ambient mantle, and this means that komatiite melts were formed in mantle plumes. And so here is the model which explains how we can produce komatiite magma enriched in water and chlorine in a mantle plume. So the idea is that Archaean mantle plume was traversing transitional zone of mantle. This zone is below 410 kilometers in mantle, and it's capable of holding high concentrations of water, fluorine and chlorine, which is shown experimentally and shown by recent finding of water-rich ring woodite inclusion in diamond. So this Archaean plume was partially molten, as demonstrated by this PT diagram. So it's above solidus at this potential temperature, and it could entrain material of the mantle transition zone. When it so on the way to the surface, water was segregated from the material of transition zone and led to very extensive melting, up to 50%. And at these depths, the density of komatiite melt became lower than the density of residue, and the komatiite melt would separate to form lava flows on the surface. So that's our idea. And also we did some hydrogen isotopes. This diagram was already shown by Alex Sobolev. I don't have much time, but I can tell you quickly that this was done for a separate melt inclusions, a set of melt inclusions, and we did different experimental conditions, and I think we had something like overheat our melt inclusions because our results show that we had some hydrogen loss through the host olivine, and you can see very deuterium-rich melt inclusions here. So this is melt inclusions data. But we are confirmed that we still see the magmatic hydrogen isotopic compositions because these adjacent lava flows from vertebrates show shift which is consistent with assimilation process. So this system was not disturbed, and we can recalculate the initial DH ratios of before the hydrogen loss, and it yields very light isotopic composition of the primary melts, which could, like Alex showed you, which could be consistent with the recycling of dehydrated lithosphere and entrainment of its material in the Komatiite generating plume. So here is a summary, and thank you for attention.
I would have so many questions, but we have to move to the next
Okay.
talk. We can talk after. Okay? So our next talk is going to be given by